If you had arrived in Venice in the year 1500, you would not have stepped into a city. You would have stepped into a system. A city that floated, yet dominated. A republic built on mud and timber that somehow controlled the most valuable trade routes on Earth. Spices worth fortunes moved through its docks. Gold flowed into its banks. Diplomats negotiated beneath its painted ceilings, and fleets of warships waited silently beyond its lagoons. Venice did not rule through size, it ruled through design. And for centuries, it outsmarted empires larger than itself. To understand Venice, you must first understand fear. In the early Middle Ages, waves of invasion swept across mainland Italy. Germanic tribes, Lombards, instability everywhere. Families fled toward the marshy lagoons along the Adriatic coast. The land there was unstable, flooded, inhospitable. It was not meant for cities, but it was defensible. Wooden pilings were driven deep into mud. Platforms were built. Homes rose slowly above water. What began as refuge became permanence, and permanence evolved into strategy. Water did not isolate Venice, it protected it. By the 11th century, Venice had discovered something powerful. Geography could be weaponized. Sitting between Western Europe and the Byzantine East, Venice became a mediator of trade. It transported goods others could not reach. It built relationships others could not sustain. And it learned how to calculate risk. Unlike feudal kingdoms ruled by hereditary monarchs, Venice developed a republic. Its leader, the Doge, was elected, but tightly controlled by councils to prevent dictatorship. Power was shared among merchant families. No single figure could dominate. Decisions required layers of approval. This created something rare in medieval Europe: political stability. And stability attracts capital. Venice's merchants became Europe's financial intermediaries. They mastered credit systems. They financed voyages. They insured cargo. They calculated profit margins across continents. While other states fought territorial wars, Venice fought commercial wars, and it won. The arsenal of Venice became the engine of its dominance. This shipyard was unlike anything Europe had seen. Standardized parts, organized labor, controlled production flow. It functioned like a medieval assembly line. At its peak, it could produce war galleys at astonishing speed. Naval superiority was not symbolic, it was operational. Venetian ships patrolled the Adriatic Sea and pushed into the eastern Mediterranean. Crete, Cyprus, and strategic ports fell under Venetian influence. Trade agreements with Constantinople secured privileged access to eastern goods. Spices, silk, precious metals all passed through Venetian hands before reaching Europe. Venice became the middleman between worlds, and middlemen become powerful when both sides depend on them. But Venice understood something deeper. Trade without protection is fragile, so it invested heavily in naval defense. Convoys traveled under armed escort. Pirates were hunted relentlessly. Competitors like Genoa were confronted in brutal naval wars. The rivalry with Genoa was not just commercial, it was existential. Both cities sought control over Mediterranean trade. Battles erupted across decades, yet Venice's disciplined governance and financial backing allowed it to sustain prolonged campaigns. War was expensive. Venice could afford it. By the 15th century, Venice stood at the height of its power. Its architecture reflected confidence. The Doge's palace was not built like a fortress. It was open, elegant, almost delicate, because Venice projected control without paranoia. St. Mark's Basilica gleamed with mosaics influenced by Byzantine art, symbolizing cultural fusion born of trade. But dominance invites resistance. In 1453, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Empire. The balance shifted dramatically. The Ottomans controlled the gateway between Europe and Asia. Venetian trade routes were threatened. Ports once friendly became contested. Venice now faced an empire larger, more centralized, and militarily formidable. Wars between Venice and the Ottomans became frequent and brutal. Naval engagements determined control of islands and ports. Each loss meant financial contraction. Each victory preserved influence. Venice adapted strategically. It negotiated peace treaties when advantageous. It paid tributes when necessary. It reinforced fortifications across its maritime territories. It modernized fleets. Flexibility prolonged survival. But history rarely pauses. While Venice focused on Mediterranean dominance, something revolutionary was happening in the Atlantic. Portuguese navigators found routes around Africa. Spanish explorers crossed oceans. Trade no longer required passing through Venetian-controlled waters. The world widened. And with it, Venice's monopoly shrank. Atlantic powers began accumulating wealth at unprecedented scales. Gold and silver from the Americas flooded European markets. Lisbon and Seville rose in importance. Later, Amsterdam and London would refine financial systems further. Venice mastered the Mediterranean, but the center of gravity was shifting westward. This was not sudden collapse. Venice remained wealthy for centuries. It transitioned towards banking, luxury goods, and cultural influence. Venetian glass, textiles, and art became renowned. Renaissance masters flourished under its patronage. But maritime dominance faded. Geography that once empowered Venice now limited it. Its lagoon, perfect for medieval naval defense, was less suited for larger ocean-going vessels. Trade networks reorganized around Atlantic corridors. The system that made Venice dominant was brilliant, but it was regionally optimized. And when the region lost centrality, so did the system. Yet Venice's legacy endures. It demonstrated that wealth could be engineered, that governance could be structured to prevent internal collapse, that risk could be calculated, that commerce could fund military strength, that diplomacy could extend survival. Venice was not the largest power, it was the most strategically aligned power for its time. It transformed vulnerability into advantage, mud into infrastructure, water into defense, trade into empire. Even its decline offers a lesson. No system, however intelligent, remains dominant forever. Global flows shift, technology evolves, geography redefines relevance, but innovation leaves marks. Modern financial systems echo Venetian credit networks. Naval logistics reflect lessons from its arsenal. Republican governance models share philosophical roots with its councils. Venice did not disappear into obscurity. It transitioned from dominance to influence. And perhaps that is the final measure of power. Not how loud would you conquer, but how long your design shapes the future. Today, tourists glide through canals where war galleys once mobilized. Sunlight reflects off palaces that once hosted negotiations shaping Mediterranean politics. The quiet beauty hides a memory of calculated ambition. Venice did not rule through brute force, it ruled through structure. It controlled trade routes, it stabilized governance, it managed risk, it protected capital, it understood timing. And for centuries, that was enough to command the sea. History moves in centers of gravity. Venice was one of them. Then the Atlantic replaced it, and another city rose. The question is not whether Venice fell. The question is whether any city can ever permanently control the currents of global change. Venice once believed it could, and for a time, it did.